Pilot suicide. This theory paints Captain Zaharie Ahmad Shah in a grim light, and it's one that has dominated much of the conversation about MH370's disappearance. The idea is that Zaharie, for unknown reasons, decided to take the lives of everyone on board along with his own. It's a horrifying thought. Just think of boarding a flight with an experienced pilot at the helm, only for that person to be planning the ultimate tragedy. Zaharie was a senior pilot with over 18,000 flying hours under his belt. On paper, he seemed like the last person who would do something like this, but that's where it gets eerie. Investigators found that he had plotted a similar route to MH370's final known path on his home flight simulator just weeks before the flight. It could have been innocent, or it could have been a dress rehearsal for the real thing. What makes this theory particularly chilling is how calculated it would have to be. The turn MH370 made just after it lost contact with air traffic control was sharp and precise, something only a skilled pilot could pull off. Then, according to this theory, Zaharie depressured the cabin, rendering the passengers and crew unconscious, and continued flying the plane for hours before crashing it into the ocean. The terrifying part? They were all likely unconscious for the majority of the flight. It's not just about Zaharie's alleged mental state, it's about how disturbingly calm and methodical his entire plan would have been. Yet, there's no definitive proof of Zaharie's involvement. His friends and family have consistently denied that he was capable of such an act. So, while this theory makes sense to some, the lack of a clear motive and any hard evidence leaves us questioning whether it's too convenient to blame the pilot. Hijacking gone wrong. This theory initially seemed plausible because it ticks off so many boxes. Hijackings happen and planes have been commandeered before for political or terrorist reasons, but here's where things get strange. MH370 didn't send out any distress signals and no group ever claimed responsibility for it. Normally, a hijacker would demand something, money, political concessions, or at the very least recognition for their act. But in this case, nothing. It's like the plane vanished into thin air with no clear goal in mind. One popular variation of this theory is that hijackers took control of the cockpit and the pilots tried to fight back, leading to a loss of control and a fatal crash. Another possibility is that the hijackers had intended to land the plane at some remote location. Some even speculate the plane was meant to be used later for a more nefarious purpose like a terror attack. But if so, why wasn't the plane found? If this was a hijacking gone wrong, why weren't there any signs of a struggle or any ransom demands? This theory keeps many questions swirling. Were the hijackers just incompetent, or were they professionals who vanished into thin air like the plane itself? It's the lack of concrete details that makes this theory both compelling and deeply frustrating. Something clearly went wrong, but without evidence, we're left wondering what. Mechanical failure. On the surface, this is probably the least shocking of all the theories, but sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one, right? According to this theory, MH370 suffered a catastrophic failure that left the pilots helpless and the plane crashed as a result. Some experts suggest that there could have been an electrical failure, a fire, or even a sudden depressurization of the cabin. If the cabin lost pressure, both the passengers and crew could have lost consciousness due to the lack of oxygen, leaving the plane on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. In this scenario, no one would have been able to send out a distress call, which explains the eerie silence. But here's where it gets strange. MH370 didn't just fly straight and crash. The plane made a sharp, calculated turn and flew for hours in the opposite direction of its flight path, which would require manual intervention. Even if the pilots had lost control early on, the plane's erratic flight pattern doesn't quite fit the profile of a typical mechanical failure. Plus, Boeing 777s are built with multiple redundancies in place to prevent these kinds of failures from causing total disaster. It raises the unnerving question. If it wasn't a technical malfunction, what human error or outside force could have caused this seemingly deliberate flight path? Military cover-up. Alright, now we're getting into full-blown conspiracy territory, but stay with me because this theory has some wild twists. The idea is that MH370 accidentally flew into a highly restricted military zone, possibly near the US military base in Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. According to this theory, the plane posed some sort of perceived threat and the military shot it down. Of course, such an incident would cause a major international scandal, so the theory posits that the military covered it up, sweeping the wreckage under the rug, or rather under the ocean. Supporters of this theory point to the strange lack of radar data and the fact that certain military zones might have the capability to erase planes from radar. Could it be that MH370's disappearance wasn't a glitch, but a deliberate act of concealment? The idea might sound far-fetched, but it taps into a deep mistrust many people have of government secrecy. After all, if a powerful nation were responsible for downing a passenger jet by mistake, it would do everything in its power to keep that under wraps, right? Still, it's hard to imagine such a massive operation without any leaks or whistleblowers, yet the lack of evidence also makes you wonder, could this really be what happened? Cyber hijacking. In our age of digital warfare, the idea that MH370 was hijacked remotely without anyone stepping foot in the cockpit is not as crazy as it sounds. This theory posits that hackers could have taken control of the plane's flight systems, diverting it from its intended path and flying it to an unknown destination, or possibly crashing it deliberately. The concept of cyber hijacking introduces a terrifying possibility. What if a plane's complex computer systems could be compromised by someone with malicious intent sitting miles away? Modern planes are heavily automated, which is generally considered a safety feature, but it also makes them vulnerable to cyber attacks. If someone managed to gain access to MH370's controls remotely, they could have manipulated its flight path without the pilots even realizing what was happening. The big question here is, why? What would be the motive behind such an attack, and why was there never any ransom or demands made? The absence of a clear reason makes this theory unsettling because it suggests a new type of threat we haven't fully come to terms with yet. One where control is taken from the ground without any trace. Shot down. This theory is similar to the US cover-up idea, but spreads the blame a little wider. Instead of the US, some suggest that MH370 was shot down by another nation, possibly China, Russia, or even Malaysia itself, either by mistake or to prevent the plane from doing something dangerous. According to this line of thinking, MH370 might have veered into restricted airspace, prompting a country to take drastic action. After all, governments don't tend to be very forgiving when it comes to protecting their borders, especially when it involves an unidentified aircraft. Supporters of this theory argue that a cover-up could explain the lack of any solid evidence pointing to a crash, but let's pause for a second. Could multiple nations really keep such a massive secret for so long? We live in a world where information leaks constantly, yet a decade later, nothing definitive has come out. Still, history has shown that governments are capable of sweeping some pretty big things under the rug. If MH370 was shot down, the big question is, why hasn't a single piece of concrete evidence surfaced to expose the truth? Undisclosed landing. Now, this theory is both hopeful and terrifying. It suggests that the plane didn't crash at all, but instead landed somewhere remotely, possibly a hidden airstrip or deserted island. Some versions of this theory claim that the passengers and crew are still alive, being held captive by some mysterious force, whether that be a rogue government, criminal organization, or something even more sinister. The thought of 239 people being alive and hidden away for nearly a decade is as eerie as it is heartbreaking. However, several pieces of debris linked to MH370 have washed ashore over the years, including parts of the wing and flaperon, so how do we reconcile the wreckage with this idea? One explanation could be that only part of the plane broke off while the rest landed somewhere intact. But here's the thing, after all this time, with all the technology and international cooperation, wouldn't someone have found a trace of where the plane landed by now? It's a beautiful thought that there's still hope for the passengers, but at this point, it feels more like a lingering wish than a likely scenario. Alien abduction. We're going there because in a mystery this big, even aliens make the list. Some people genuinely believe MH370 was intercepted and taken by extraterrestrials. According to this theory, an alien ship either zapped the plane out of the sky or captured it mid-flight. This could explain why no distress signals were sent, why the radar showed the plane flying erratically before disappearing, and why no substantial wreckage was ever found. The idea is that the passengers and crew were either abducted or transported somewhere far away, perhaps even to another planet. This is the most far-fetched theory, obviously, but it has its devoted followers. After all, when you're dealing with a mystery as baffling as MH370, any explanation starts to feel valid when the conventional ones don't pan out. Could it be that we're not looking in the right direction because we're focused on earthly explanations? While this theory is fun to entertain, it doesn't offer any satisfying answers. Instead, it plays into the larger human desire to find meaning in the inexplicable, even if that meaning involves little green men from outer space. Cargo hijack. Finally, let's look into the lesser-known theory that raises an eyebrow, the cargo hijack. What if MH370 wasn't about the passengers at all, but about something valuable in the cargo hold? It might sound like something out of a heist movie, but bear with me. According to this theory, the flight was carrying high-value cargo, potentially sensitive electronics, or even military equipment that someone desperately wanted or wanted to get rid of. It could have been a covert operation where the cargo was stolen and the rest of the plane was disposed of to erase any trace of the crime. Here's where it gets interesting. While MH370's cargo manifest was publicly released, there were sections that remained vague or incomplete. What was in the cargo that was so secret? There's also the mysterious presence of lithium-ion batteries aboard the plane. Sure, these are common in electronics, but they're also known to cause fires. Could a fire have broken out, and in the chaos, someone took control of the situation to get whatever was valuable? Or was this all planned from the start? Now, the shocking part of this theory is how well executed it would have to be. To hijack a plane for cargo, make it disappear, and never get caught takes a level of coordination and secrecy that's chilling. It's like something straight out of a spy novel. While this theory doesn't have as much evidence as others, it adds a whole new layer of intrigue. It makes you wonder, was the disappearance of MH370 not just a tragic incident, but the result of a high-stakes heist?